So our bench chair.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I hope you all are safe tonight. We're very excited. Please buy a ticket for $10 to our benefit, which is a pancake, sausage, eggs, and a drink of your choice on October 26th. That's a Saturday. You can come and eat between 8 and 10 a.m. We will have speakers. Not lined up yet, but please come to our benefit and bring your family and your friends and whoever else you can bring. Any questions? Because we're going to keep telling you to use tickets.
Tickets are in the back if you want to get yes?
Tickets.
Right,
Maureen?
we want to sell about.
Oh,
at
you're just
least-
waving your hands, get tickets from me?
Me.
We want to sell about 100 at least, and also, if you know anybody 16 and up, we do have to man the breakfast. So if you're capable of carrying trays, or you know someone that is, we'd like that kind of help.
We need servers. We need people to serve the food, serve the beverages, bus the tables, and we're going to have a few people at the door for people that walk in and pay that morning. So any help that you can give us would be grateful. We can't do it without you. So please come.
And also, if you've not renewed your membership, that we always renew in July, just remember July 4th renew. So if you haven't renewed your membership, please do that. Also, if you know anybody that wants to join or invite them, remember that our meetings are public and anyone's allowed to come.
And if you've already renewed and you haven't picked up your membership card, please see them. And right now, Delegate Miyares is coming in, so. All right, I'm also going to pass this around. Regent University, American Majority is looking at maybe having campaign for a day. I know I participated in this up in Richmond. It's kind of fun to get groups of people together, put them in groups. Somebody's the candidate, somebody's the campaign manager, somebody does the, the Facebook, the communications and stuff like that. You compete against each other. It's kind of fun. And it lets you know what goes involved in the campaign. So if you're interested, they want to see how many people. So I'm just passing that around. But right now, our guest speaker has arrived. He is the delegate from the 82nd District. Delegate Jason Miyares was elected 2 years ago and is up for re-election this year, right? So if I could have a round of applause for Delegate Miyares.
It's awesome to be here. I know a lot of y'all are friends. I see Commodore's here. My good friend Kenny Golden. I see Mr. Dean here, so it's good to be here. Those of you I don't know, I'm Jason Miyares. I represent part of Virginia Beach in the House of Delegates. I first got elected in 2015. Served as a time as a Virginia Beach prosecutor. Is that okay if I have my coffee up here? Is that?
Yes.
Of course. It's kind of like
We're
a
informal.
conversation. Good. I like informal. Sorry, I am not, in a coat and tie, but I was out door knocking beforehand, and I find showing up at somebody's house in a sports coat, they think you're selling an encyclopedia. So I generally like to dress down. It is a lot of fun, but I will tell you, it's also eye-opening. Last Saturday, I was out in Allenton, knocked on a door, and it was pretty hot, so I had shorts on, and I knocked on the door, and the lady, very nice constituent, came to the door and opened the door, and she looked at me, and she goes, "So where's the food?" And I was like, "I'm sorry." She's like, "Yeah, I called like 35 minutes ago." I was like, "Not the pizza delivery boy." And she was really embarrassed. She'd met me before, and we had a good conversation. They had just got back in town for vacation, and had ordered food, and then literally while I was walking down the driveway, the pizza delivery boy came up. I think it'd be important for you guys to know a little bit of my story as well, and then I will tell you why I think this fall is important, because I think at the end of the day, if you're here today, you definitely care about the size and scope of government. And that is a very personal thing for me because of my family story. I like to tell people that my story doesn't begin in Virginia Beach, Virginia. It actually begins in Havana, Cuba in 1965 with a scared 19-year-old girl got on an airplane and literally they closed on her. And that was my mother. And when you're in a communist country, and if there's anything that bothers me the most about some of the trend lines I see in America today, particularly when I talk to young people, is this sudden infatuation with socialism, which I simply can't get my arms around. I like to point out to people that the year Fidel Castro took power in Cuba, Cuba had the same GDP as Italy. And the year that Fidel Castro died, Cuba had the same GDP as Sudan. That gives you a perspective of how socialism wrecked what at the time was the country with the highest standard of living in the Caribbean. Or as I tell people, you don't see many vacation advertisements for Venezuela these days. But there seems to be a little bit of this infatuation, and so that really affected me hearing my mother's story. When you leave a communist country, it's not like if you say you're going to immigrate to Ireland. My legislative aide is here. Her daughter lives in Ireland. So if you're to move to Ireland, you can transfer your assets, you can change your banks, you can box up all of your valuables, put some of them in storage, they're still yours, you ship them overseas. The problem what's so hideous about communism is it literally takes everything from you. And so you request to leave, you never know when the government's going to grant you that request. You're basically living on a jail island. And the last thing you do is the government comes to you right before you go to the airport. They take away your passport, so literally your stateless. And they post a notice on the door. And it says, property of the revolution. And so imagine you're home right now. Imagine if you were to go home right now and you had to leave. You had a notice on your door of your home and it said, property of the revolution. And every single thing in your home of value, anything that, any personal note, any personal letters, any photographs of loved ones, any family heirlooms, anything that you have at that moment is no longer yours, it's stripped of you. Imagine your bank account. Everything in your bank account. Any money that you saved up to hopefully pass on to your future generations. Imagine that that is now no longer yours, it's now the property of the government. And sometimes as Americans we think, too many think that we live in the default status of the way human beings live, right? We have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. And we realize actually this is a really unique experiment in human liberty. Thomas Jefferson called us the last best hope. That's how he called America. And think about when he said that. He said that when we were an infant nation, there was nobody in Europe at that time that probably looked at us as the last best hope. They thought we were crazy, this experiment in self-government, right? And so when my mother fled Cuba and went to Spain and eventually immigrated to the United States, for me, growing up outside of Christmas, the biggest holiday of the year was always July 4th. Because I was raised always to be reminded how lucky I was to breathe the air as a free man. And if there's anything that's terrifying, in fact, I was talking to my mother earlier today. She is a constituent. She says every time she hears Bernie Sanders speak, she hears Fidel. And I never thought I would be in a country where the thought leader of the Democratic Party is Bernie Sanders, who 20 years ago was a discredited socialist from Vermont. And now, pretty much almost every major policy position that he has adopted, the Democratic Party has now adopted. Abolishing private insurance. Every candidate running for president has now essentially adopted them. Radical redistribution of wealth, the Democratic Party has wholesale adopted that. And so, I think we're at a really critical next, not just this election, but the elections coming up to defining who we're going to be as a country. What we want that role of government's going to be. And how we're going to deal with that. You know, my mom left Cuba that fall, 1965, with the clothes on her back, leaving a country with no consent of the government. And almost 50 years to the day that she left, she was able to vote for me to represent her in the oldest democracy in the Western Hemisphere, the General Assembly. It's like what I call the American miracle. And if there's anything that I do a lot in the General Assembly. I work a lot on issues like flooding, public safety, and everything else to make Virginia a better state. But if there's any charge that I have that I hope that I can keep, is the ability to talk to and communicate with the next generation of Americans about how important it is, this unique experiment. You know, if you think about it, most of the people who woke up on this planet today woke up with lives fundamentally different than your own. You know, I like to say that what separates us from most of the rest of the world is the knock of the door, right? Right? We hear that, oh, it's a neighbor coming over to say hello, or Amazon Prime's dropping something off, or my golden retriever got out again. But if you think about it, most of the people woke up this morning on this planet, when they hear this, that means something totally different. It means it's somebody from the powers that be, whether it's a government or they're living in their caliphate, they're coming to take you away because you're worshiping God in a manner they don't agree with, and you've spoken out against the powers that be, or you've spoken out for the humans. We're seeing some pretty brave souls in Hong Kong right now. We're waving the American flag, and unfortunately I have this sinking pit in my stomach of how it's going to end. Which, do any of y'all ever read the Babylon Bee? Do you ever know what that is? It's basically like a conservative version of The Onion. There's a hilarious satire piece that a friend of mine sent me, and the headline was the headline said, "Trump strikes deal with China. We'll send you our communists if you give us your pro-democracy protesters." And it was a picture of some people, I think in Portland, waving a hammer and sickle flag with it right next to it, pictures of the Hong Kong protesters waving the American flag. I was like, that is a delicious bit of irony. So, from an 80,000 feet view, I think we are at an interesting moment where we have a lot of young people, and I think we're also at a time, quite frankly, we're the most connected and disconnected we've ever been as a country. There was a study that was done that showed that over 50% of Americans, right around 50% of Americans, do not even know the name of their neighbor. That's stunning to me. Think about where we came in the 1950s and 60s and 70s to now we don't even know the name of our neighbor. Now, I confess, I don't know the name of my neighbor to the right of me, but that's because they're my fourth neighbor in about 6 years, so I think I have a good excuse. But 33% of millennials were polled and said they do not have a single friend. So, you know, we've essentially replaced, you know, friendship with, you know, Facebooks. And there was a study, I literally read this study this morning. They actually showed the more time you spend on Facebook, the more depressed you get. Just think about it. Nobody ever posts on Facebook. I had an awful day. I spilled coffee all over me. I was late. My boss yelled at me. I had a client angry at me. Nobody ever posts that. Everybody posts this picture-perfect life that's totally devoid of the reality of the fact that we all deal with our struggles. We all deal with things that aggravate us and frustrate us. And but we've replaced the joy of human interaction with social media likes, and that's an entire generation of young people. I'm blessed when my daughters go to Great Neck Middle. I think we have the best principal in the area because one of the things he requires is kids can't have cell phones during the school day. Now, does that not seem like common sense to everybody in this room? Yeah. That's a really unique position here.
Wow.
He's one of the few principals that do it. They allow cell phones in elementary school. So, we're raising an ADD generation, unfortunately. We're having this kind of corrosive influence that's having on human interaction, and I think as a result, we're getting, I think, pretty disjointed, and people are not talking to each other. Now, I'll tell you that for us locally, if you care about the role and the size and scope of government, if you love Virginia, we have a really important elections coming up in a couple of weeks. And I will literally read to you a story from Politico, which if you don't know Politico, it's exactly what you think of a Washington, D.C. based kind of inside the Beltway, you know, mainstream media type publication. But they literally had this article and it was talking about all this outside money that's coming in. But this is a direct quote from the article. Because as you know, if you don't know, we have a 1-seat Republican majority in the House, a 1-seat Republican majority in the Senate, and that's all that separates us from one-party control, Democratic control of Virginia. This is the quote. "A full Democratic takeover would usher in the most liberal government in Virginia history." And one thing that the late great Bob Perky used to always say would be, half of your job as a legislator is not just the bills you pass, but it's the really bad bills that you stop. And we've already seen a lot of those battles that you've seen in DC, we've already dealt with. So the Green New Deal, how many of you are familiar with that? Or, I mean, that would double or...
Heard of it.
You heard of it? Well, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's, I guess, the fresh face of the Democratic Party, if you read pretty much every mainstream media outlet, has proposed this proposal that is completely unworkable, not realistic, and would double or triple every American's electricity and energy costs overnight. It has gotten completely fawning coverage from some people in some quarters, but we essentially already dealt with that. And it was, essentially defeated on a party line vote. And I see time and time again, and what I tell people, and I'm not exaggerating, that we're one vote away in the General Assembly from becoming Maryland or California overnight. And I think that should be sobering for everybody. If you care about Virginia, A, you need to get out the vote. B, you need to tell 10 of your friends to get out the vote. We need to help wherever you live. I know people from all over, Virginia Beach or Chesapeake, wherever your home is. But you support your local candidate who is committed to making sure that we don't become California overnight. I don't want to live in California, I want to live in Virginia. It amazing me, California is having a net migration to essentially states that are low tax, lower regulation. Texas has obviously received a boon of Californians that have fled. And I was just talking to a gentleman literally on Sunday on the beach. He moved here 12 months ago from California. He told me that when he left California, he filled up his tank with gas one last time. It was $5.21 at the pump. $5.21 at the pump. And he says, I feel like I live in freedom. So I got to tell him a little bit. I was like, well, I hate to break it to you. But in 2 months, we could have a radically different type of state government that has a totally different view of the size and scope of government. We defeated last year and the year before last well over $1 billion of just taxes. If you talk to any small business owner, half of your job, half of the most aggravating part isn't necessarily the taxes as much as the regulations. And the regulations that we've implemented. I mean, Virginia generally has been considered one of the best run states in the country, and I think in a very healthy manner. In California, their legislature meets year-round. So a lot of those legislators in California justify their existence by passing regulation after regulation, tax after tax, law after law. In Virginia, dating back to Mr. Jefferson's time, you go up, you do your job, you come home. You have 45 days or 60 days, depending upon the year, but you're not a full-time legislature. You're expected to go up, do your job, we balance your budget every year, we have a tax rebate coming to you in a couple of weeks, we try to keep regulations down to a minimum, and we come home. You compare that to California, where they meet year-round, and they're always passing more and more and more and more, and that's what we're trying to stop. There's a Democratic delegate from Alexandria, Alfonso Lopez. Actually, he's not a bad guy, he's just way liberal. But there was a video of him giving a speech in Northern Virginia at a fundraiser, and probably didn't realize he was being taped, but he said, hey, just give us 48 hours. If we get the majority, just give us 48 hours. And you will be blown away at the progressive change that will happen. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's what the stakes are. So I challenge everybody here to, A, take it seriously. I like to say the world is run by those that show up. So show up, support your local candidate that's running. I don't care if you're Virginia Beach or where you are. And not just vote for them and put a sign in your yard and put a bumper sticker in your car, but also consider talking to your neighbors, go door knocking, talk to your friends. I think this is going to be a really critical defining election for Virginia. So, with that, that's a quick summation. I really don't know how long you want me to talk. You want me to take
Well,
questions or?
I did want you to talk about the gun control bills.
The gun
The
control
special
bill.
session.
The special
and-
session.
And your bills that
My
you put
bill.
in.
So a lot of people have talked about my, we had a special session that happened July 9th. Obviously, we had probably one of the darkest days in Virginia Beach history, May 31st. And I will tell you, that was by far the hardest week to 2 weeks as an elected official, because I met privately with some of the victims, and the family members, and they don't get elected and they don't teach you how to be a counselor. And these are people dealing with empty chairs the rest of their lives. They're going to be every Thanksgiving and every Christmas and every birthday. And that was by far, that was an emotional roller coaster. I'll just be candid. So you work through that, and the governor called a special session, which was pretty unusual. Had never been done before. About 2 weeks before we went back in special session, the governor was asked at Boise State if anything that he was proposing would have stopped the shooting in Virginia Beach on May 31st, and he admitted no. And when normal legislation is filed, we go in January. We start filing legislation in the fall, July, August, September, October, November for January. And I think I mentioned we balance our budget every year in Virginia. That's a constitutional requirement. We're not allowed to vote on bills unless we have a fiscal impact statement. Every bill has to be studied to see what much it costs. If there's any frustration that I have a little bit with how the media covered what happened was, we went there at 12 noon on July 9th. The governor called us in the special session. We had 27 bills that were filed at 11:30 a.m. 30 minutes before we got to the floor. 30 minutes. Now, if there's anything I never want Richmond to be, is what Washington, D.C. is, which is completely and utterly broken. And we all remember Nancy Pelosi's quote where you have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. That is not thoughtful, deliberate government. Washington, D.C. is the opposite of thoughtful and deliberate government. So the decision was made since, and this is the other thing I think was frustrating as the media completely missed, the Democratic floor leader even got up on the floor, Marcus Simon, and said, hey, listen, we need to come back later. There's no way we could deal with this legislation today. We need to come back later and vote on it. So he was admitting there's no way we could deal with this today in this setting. So Virginia has the State Crime Commission. It's bipartisan. It has Republicans and Democrats serving the commission. It has public policy experts, law enforcement experts, mental health experts who serve on the commission. These bills didn't have a fiscal impact statement at all. And some of these, like, I talked to a friend of mine he says, well, I don't understand, you still could have voted on X and Y. I said, listen, even if it was a bill banning whatever, that's still a law. A law says if you're convicted, it means you have to serve time in a penitentiary, which means there's beds, which means there's a cost to the state. So even stuff that you can't vote on things without knowing how much they cost. Even things you don't think are going to cost, you simply can't do that. We don't function that way. We never have. So we referred everything to the Independent Crime Commission. I actually testified in August on my bill. So the bill that I drafted, which got some attention, and some people here may like it, some people may not, but I think it'd be good for me to explain it. It's called the Severe Threat Order of Protection. Because after May 31st and after you meet with those families, I kind of stepped back and really wanted to take a really hard look at the just quite frankly, the numbers. First of all, I support the Second Amendment. I mean, the Second Amendment does not exist for hunting. If that's something that frustrates me sometimes in the debate. It is liberty dating back to English common law, actually dating back to the English Civil War, the 1600s, which is concept, which is you have a right, and part of your bundle of liberty is your ability to defend yourself and your family and your property. Right? It dates back It's part of the English common law tradition. You read Blackstone's commentaries. You could read just commentary from colonial time about how the founders and the framers understood it. But looking at numbers, I want to see, okay, what are the numbers? There's a couple things that stood out to me. One of the things that shocked me the most was the fact that overall gun violence in America is actually on a 3-decade downward trajectory. When I tell people that, they are utterly floored, but it makes a little sense when you look at what we've done in the last couple of decades, right? Mark Twain has a great quote that says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme, right? So in the 1970s, we adopted very liberal sentencing laws. And the end result of adopting all these liberal sentencing laws is a crime explosion in the 1980s. So, for example, in Virginia, up until George Allen getting elected in 1993, the average time you spent, if you were convicted of a crime, was 1/4 of your sentence. So you commit an armed robbery with a gun, you get sentenced to 20 years, you make parole in 5. Or you commit a rape, you're out in 5, get sentenced for 20 years. So, I'm a former prosecutor, well over 80% of all crime is done by repeat offenders. Well over. So it makes sense that in the 90s, when we started saying if you do the crime, you do the time, you're going to be taken off our street. In Virginia, you have to serve at least a minimum of 85% of your sentence. Okay? So we did truthful sentencing, we did abolition of parole, crime rates plummeted. In Virginia did it, countless other states followed our lead, and Virginia Beach crime rates are at 1964 levels, right? Virginia also has the lowest recidivism rate of any state in the country, because criminals know if I do the crime, I do the time, and I don't want to go back in, right? So we're now in this huge push, and maybe we went too far. I mean, it's a good debate to have, but there's a lot of people saying, listen, we need to get away from mandatory minimums and bring back parole. Again, I think what you would see is a crime explosion, right? So we are standing on the shoulders of 2+ decades of smart public policy that took violent criminals off our street. So when I tell people, ironically, that overall crime violence in this country is approaching a 3-decade low, they're shocked. Now, what is a skyrocketing in mass shootings, which are defined as shootings where 4 or more in one setting. And so I said, well, okay, well, what are we looking at here? And overwhelmingly, there was a study out of Minnesota that showed overwhelmingly the thing that's tied to a lot of these mass shootings is our mental health component. The other thing, and this was a statistic that utterly floored me, where I went to the Center for Disease Control to look at the numbers, which oftentimes the media glosses over or very rarely mentions. On average, and this is a 10-year average, on average, 62% of all gun deaths in America are suicides. Let me repeat that. 62% of all gun deaths in America are suicides. They're not mass shootings. They're not robberies. 62% are suicides. Clearly, there's a mental health component. And that floored me. And it further floored me when the governor came out against when the speaker was laying out the parameters of the special session, one that included mental health. The governor came out against it and said, no, you're avoiding the problem. We got to talk about gun control. And I found that pretty infuriating. Don't claim that you're serious about reducing gun violence if you're not looking at the issue that's causing 62% of all gun deaths in this country, which is suicide. So I believe in the Constitution. I think it's one of the finest documents known to man. And so you've heard a lot of these terms of red flag laws, which the concept is those that have mental problems that show evidence that they're going to do harm to themselves, preventing them from getting a firearm. But that is a very broad term that means very different things in very different states, right? So you go to Maryland, which, and again, I had a spreadsheet, Becky's here, I looked at so many different states and so many different proposals. But for me, a very important aspect of the Constitution is the Fifth Amendment, which is you cannot take away someone's property without life, liberty, or due process of law. I'm sorry, my daughter is calling me. And I think she may think I'm picking her up in the ballet. Can I just answer real quick?
Sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Hey, honey. Mommy's picking you.
In there.
How to speak you? I don't know. She knows, she just said
While he's
type,
talking.
text you.
Jason will be addressing the red flag laws
Oh,
2 weeks from tomorrow, Libertarian breakfast meeting.
all right.
And he's going
Let
to
me,
need to wear
let me,
full
I'll
armor.
text mommy and I'll text
And
you. Okay, all right.
so he'll be doing it in 2 weeks, he'll be addressing this.
Sorry about that, guys. Can I just,
Yes.
my precious oldest girl does ballet 5 days a week in Norfolk. And so as you can imagine, there's always a contest. My wife, not contest, but, all right, who's picking up who at softball and who's picking up who at Ballet Virginia, and you're racing around. And let me just, if you just indulge me so I can text my better half and just tell her, hey, man. I'm really sorry, guys, but I like her being a dad and being a delegate, so.
I thought this is what your aide got paid to do.
No, I never, no. I never ask anybody to do anything I don't do myself. Okay, I'm sorry. So a due process of law, which obviously you can be denied. We currently have the death penalty in this country. You can be denied your life if you have due process of law, your liberty. You commit a crime. If you're mentally deranged, you can be mentally held against your will if you have due process of law. So for me, it was important. The due process side was a very important side. So I looked at what other states have done. I was very intrigued by legislation that was introduced in the Arizona State Senate that I thought had some really good due process protection. Maybe not as much as I'd like to see, but the idea is this: is if you're an individual showing, because here's what we often see with a lot of these mass shootings, individuals that are showing clear signs they are a ticking time bomb, right? In Parkland, the sheriff went to that killer's house 32 times before the shooting. The shooting in Dayton, he posted people he wanted to rape, torture, and kill publicly, and his girlfriend had warned the police. The shooting in Odessa, Texas, the guy had called the FBI hotline, who clearly had just lost a job and had a complete, and his loved ones had said the guy was clearly having a complete mental break from reality. How often do we see, and we don't know quite what happened in Virginia Beach. I mean, I've had different family members confide stuff, but I'm out of respect for them, I'll let them talk to the independent investigator. We don't know quite what happened with the deranged individual that did the shooting in Virginia Beach. What we do know is oftentimes these people are showing signs. And so the idea is that in, for example, Maryland, somebody can literally walk into a house, a police station, and say, I think my neighbor is dangerous, they will raid the home, they'll take his guns. It gives you no due process protection, of exactly the opposite of what should be thoughtful and deliberate legislation. In my opinion, you have to have those constitutional protections. So the way mine is set up is, listen, I'm not saying everybody's going to like it. Some people may vehemently disagree with it. Some people may want to attack me on it. But the way mine is set up is if someone can go to the police and say, listen, this person is clearly exhibiting, say they're a coworker, whatever, that they are violence towards themselves or others. If they make a false statement to police, it's a class 6 felony, which I don't have in Maryland. So if you lie to the police and cause them to investigate somebody, that is a class 6 felony, because I thought that was important too. The police can do an independent investigation. If they find with probable cause that this is true, you then go in front of a judge. A judge has to determine by clear and convincing evidence, which is the highest evidentiary standard in a court of law, that you're a clear threat, an imminent threat to yourself or others. And I think this is the most important part that's missing out of every other state in the country, requires within 72 hours for you to get an evaluation from your local mental health expert or your local community services board. Because again, what did I say? 62% of all gun deaths in America are suicides. Oftentimes what happens is these people, and I've had loved ones that have struggled with depression before.
Does your bill include anonymity?
I'm sorry?
Does your bill include
And being anonymous?
Yes.
I can't pronounce it either. It does not, and my daughter's calling again, and can I take it? I hate doing this, guys. Hey, baby. Is anybody, is Suzanne there? All right, just wait for Miss Suzanne, and then I'll be done here soon. I'll call. If she's not there, I'll come get you. Okay? Mommy is coming to get you, but if she doesn't pick you up, I'll come get you. I don't know what she's not doing. Probably going to traffic.
All the lights are out all over from here to Richmond.
I don't know. She's on her way to pick up. Sorry. I'm really sorry, guys.
Was the lights out when you drove here? Because some people said traffic lights are out, maybe, you know.
Gosh, no, I mean, I had traffic lights, at least the way I came. But, all right, so where was I? Red flag. And now, there's nothing anonymous about it, but the idea, and I'm not against ideas to amend the bill to make it better. I like to say I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I'm smart enough to know when I hear a good idea. If there's suggestions, I'll leave my card here. People can email me. So basically, some of it is if you have loved ones that ever dealt with depression, part of it is for them to recognize you're not alone. That's half the fight when you're dealing with depression. So that's why, for me, it was important to have a requirement that they see a mental health expert. But again, only then, only after you have an officer do an investigation, you have a judge by clear and convincing evidence, and you have a mental health expert sign off and agree. At that point, a severe threat order is entered in, or for a 14-day period of time. If you don't have access to a firearm, you cannot buy a firearm. And if you have one in your home, you can tell the judge or custodian who will take custody of those firearms. And the idea, quite frankly, is when you're dealing with 60% plus of all gun deaths or suicide, it is as much aimed at that as the mass shootings of people that are constantly making verbal threats. They want to shoot up a school or the workplace or whatever. Do I think it's perfect? Guys, I'll take suggestions. I don't think it would be perfect. But for me, it was just, I wanted to take a thoughtful and deliberate approach, and that's what I did. Yes, ma'am.
Well, what about if you live in a family or a couple and one person is thought to have issues and you take their gun away, but the other person has no issues? They lose their rights too?
So the scenario.
So there can be no gun in that home then?
He's talking about a husband and wife, the husband.
Husband,
Right,
wife, or
okay.
family?
To be honest, I would need to look at specifically in my legislation.
Because you're now dealing with people that live together, families, roommates, who knows what.
Yeah, that is an interesting scenario. I have to work through that.
And also the latest gun violence in Texas this past weekend, that person actually did fail a background check.
I heard that.
But he got this gun illegally because somebody else bought it for him.
Oh, straw man purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's half the frustration when you see in the gun debate is a lot of these are just enforce the laws on the books, right? I mean, we have one of the most effective programs they did to lower gun violence back in the late 90s and early 2000s was called Project Exile, which is if you do a crime with a gun, you get a mandatory minimum of 5 years. And word got out.
Yeah, they're looking at that guy.
And we should bring it, quite frankly, we should look at, I mean, in Virginia, we have the general rule I tell people, if you're going to do crime in Virginia, don't do it with a gun, because the penalty enhancement will come when you use it. And that's the way it should be. It's you punish those that are the criminals.
Except that, like I said, if you're doing this through law, but you're dealing with people that live in families, roommate situations, any number of ways that there are multiple people, but only maybe one person might fall under a mental health issue or something like that. But then how can you deny them the due process rights of the others?
That's I'd have to kind of work through that. I'm not against kind of working through provisions like that. That's a good point, and that's why you get input from the public. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I see that seems to be a bit of a commonality also in a lot of these masks one of the things that I see that's a commonality in a lot of these mass shootings, I feel involves the HIPAA law. And there's no communication.
Yeah.
Is anybody looking at that issue, Jason?
Yeah. That's a really tricky thing. I mean, I think the main thing, for example, that we're dealing with right now with the shooter in Virginia Beach is having a clear picture of why he did it, and if somebody who commits a mass murder like that, that's still covered by HIPAA laws. I mean, I think the larger issue that we've gotten away from, and I've talked to Ken Stolley some about this, but we used to put people in prison that had mental health issues, which was the wrong place to put them. It's the worst place. They need to be getting treatment overwhelmingly. But because we don't have enough beds, oftentimes they end up back in jail. It's the only place they can house them. But you also have this other phenomenon that, because the ACLU filed a variety of lawsuits, high profile in the 70s and early 80s, it has also become very, very difficult to voluntarily commit anybody. So what we have is we have people on the street that used to be committed, that are on the street that don't have a criminal record, but could have access to firearms, and that's something that we as a society have to really struggle with. Okay, we've reached as a society determined we don't want to have involuntary commitment to the way it used to be, which is probably the barrier was too low, and it was happening too often. Okay, but we have a balancing act now that we have to find when it comes to the fact that we have a lot of people, and a lot of our homeless individual people that need mental health. I don't claim to have all the answers. I think that HIPAA is a great point, because I think some of us as societies, how do we get our arms around the fact we have some of these mass killings, and we don't even have a complete picture because we don't have their own. I was talking to a friend of mine who doesn't live in the area, called me out of the blue, a childhood friend, and I thought this was something I had never heard before, but he called me and said, listen, I've never told you this before, but he said, I had a breakdown about 8 or 9 years ago. He said what had happened was he was dealing with some serious depression, and his doctor put him on some, the antidepressants that deal with chemicals. Well, he suddenly started having really insane thoughts of self-harm, to the point where his wife called the police, a personal friend of his who very quietly got him some help. He notified his doctor the next Monday, and the doctor said, throw all your pills away. He said, why? He said, well, a little less than 1% of the population, people that take these antidepressants, have a psychosomatic response. Well, that's scary as Hades when you think about just how medicated we are as a country, where he said, Jason, it's like an out-of-body experience. And it was the most sobering thing once I got off it, when I realized, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? And this was after Virginia Beach. He's like, I don't know, you all should look in that. And I told him, I said, it's going to be a hard thing to determine that because of the HIPAA laws. But if you think about it, if a little less than 1% of the population has these kind of reactions, goodness gracious, it's something as a society we're going to have to work to struggle with. Yes, ma'am?
It's an imperfect world. And there is a saying, thinking about what's happened in Hong Kong, where those people have no firearms at all, in fact, as little weapons as possible, that Thomas Jefferson said, I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. And there's nothing that we can do that will stop this if someone really wants to do it. And for it to cover people who don't have problems as a blanket, I have real issues with.
Right, but what I would say when it comes to my legislation is this is for people that do have problems. And it has to be agreed to by law enforcement, it has to be agreed to by a judge, and it has to be agreed to by a mental health expert.
And I know that up in Maryland, like you said, though, someone died.
Yeah, an officer got shot and I think killed.
Was killed.
When he was serving one of these red flag orders. And so what I would just counsel everybody here is just look at my bill individually. you know, it's like not all transportation bills are the same, not all education bills are the same, not all public safety bills are the same. I'm just saying, my bill is called the severe threat order, and just look at that on its own merits. I think it has the potential of things like in Parkland and others trying to stop some of this.
There have been only small amounts of these. Everybody's talking about, they're the ones that get all the attention, are these mass shootings. And some of them are probably copycat because others are doing it. But they're like, you can't even measure on the big scale how many of them are happening. Like you said, most of them are suicides. And our crime rate has gone down in the past 30 years. So sometimes I think that it's better to not do that. You offer something up because we have to do something. Well, sometimes that's not the answer. That's just my,
I got it.
thank you.
Okay, yes,
Ron,
sir.
you had a question?
On your bill, how long does the process take from the time that somebody calls in to report somebody to the point where they hopefully get to the point where they say, well, that's a false threat? Because you're going to get some emotional calls. Somebody's going to say, my neighbor did this. They're going to find out about this red flag law, and they're going to call. Police are going to come out. They may take the weapons. But how long from there do we get, does the person, if he's found okay, he gets his weapons
Well,
back?
the officer does his investigation. The officer doesn't take the weapons when he's doing his investigation. The officer does an investigation. The officer first has to find probable cause, and the standard is a clear and imminent threat to himself or others. So the officer has to do the investigation. Probable cause is the same standard an officer uses on anybody on anything. The individual then would get in front of a judge, and that's when you have a much higher evidentiary standard. You have a right to have an attorney there. It's clear and convincing evidence at the highest standard in a court of law. The judge says, yes, this person is a clear and imminent threat to himself or others, and I need a mental health expert to sign off within 72 hours. Every local community service force has a mental health expert. They have to agree that that period is severe threat order is issued, and it's good for 14 days. And the idea is for these people in these really dark places that are dealing with this severe depression on themselves and may want to harm themselves, or horrifically maybe want to take out as many people in the world because they just want to see the world burn.
Well, how long does that process take then? How long does it take, if I call something in or somebody calls in on me, how long
Hopefully
before I
it'd be a
get to
matter
a judge?
Well, I mean, it
We're
would
talking
be
hours,
24
days,
hours.
weeks?
Yeah, within 24 hours. Once the officer makes that determination, it's 24 hours. So then 72 hours after
So the
that.
police officer should be coming out there right away.
Well, they should. Yeah, I mean, officers, like anything else,
No, I
it's
understand
how
that.
backlogged they are. But if they get a call from somebody that says that, then
But they're not putting it on somebody's desk. They're getting the call as if you called in a crime. And they're going to, whenever they get down to
I
this-
think every police station is going to have to adopt their own procedure. And again, we don't have this, so we're going to have to work through what that looks like. But I would imagine in some areas which have larger, more robust police forces like ours, it would get attention pretty quickly. And others, and some of it could be an officer who listens. Just my child just posted on, Facebook that they want to slaughter everybody in their biology class and their teacher and put her head on a spike. Okay, let me go. Yeah, that's right there. Yeah, let me go out and talk to. Okay, and the process begins. So, I don't know if that answered your question or not. There's another gentleman.
I got a question. What happens if, if, like you say, somebody calls in as a bogus threat, calls the police, this guy said that,
Yeah.
the officer goes to investigate, and then you are taken down and go before a judge, and you hire an attorney, and it's found, and you find out it's bogus, who pays for the attorney's fees?
Well, it's a class 6 felony if you make a false statement. That makes my bill rather unique. So if I'm somebody who makes a false statement, have you all heard of the term swatting?
That's what I.
All right, so swatting is this awful prank that some people have done. It's happened to a variety of different conservative figures. I think Ben Shapiro may even have it happen to him, but you've had a variety of different, I think it was Glenn Beck, some conservative figure that this had happened to. But swatting is literally, somebody calls 911 and says somebody is, an armed intruder with a mask is holding these people hostage, and send cops there now, and the cops will barge in your place with guns drawn. It's called swatting, right? it's probably one of the most sick, despicable pranks a human being can play on another. If somebody makes a false statement, it's a felony.
Yeah, but how do you prove that it wasn't a false statement? If the guy interprets something that somebody says, he may interpret it as something as a threat. But yet, when they go and do the investigation, it isn't a threat.
Well, if the cop does the investigation, it's not a threat, nothing happens. He has to meet the probable cause standard. Nothing happens. Which is very different than in Maryland, where somebody just basically goes in. It's like
That's what I mean.
It's like getting a protective order. Like right now, I can get a protective order against you totally on my word. If I go down to the magistrate and I say this person came and told me they wanted to put a bullet in my head,
Even if it wasn't true.
even if it's not true. I mean, that's right now law in Virginia. That is right now law in Virginia, protective orders. So,
That is bogus, I'm sorry.
Give everybody a chance.
It is
Maggie, Marcus, Mike. Maggie, you got
Yes,
a
sir.
question?
I'm a little confused in that you're saying a false statement, are you saying a false report?
yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's a police report.
So the process.
So whenever you go to the police, you make a statement to the police on whatever.
Correct.
And you fill out that form, you make that as a statement. So that's actually its own separate, just making a false police report is its own separate criminal offense in Virginia. It's a misdemeanor. And if you make this statement related to this, it would be a felony. Because that's the whole idea, is you don't want people to use this as a,
So your bill specifically indicates that it is a written report, not a 911 call to a dispatch, and that it's.
if someone
classified
made, no,
as a
it's,
false report.
yeah. I don't have the bill in front of me, but it's a statement can be construed under the code as a written statement taken out of the police station or a statement made to a 911 dispatcher, right? If you make a statement that is knowingly false on somebody, you're making a prank, whatever, that's a felony.
I would need to check the current code, because having charged people with false reports, I'm not aware that you can do that with a dispatcher. It needs to be a signed report to a law enforcement officer. So I'm not sure how you would go with it.
Okay. I'd have to look, I mean, we're getting to maybe some unique nuance here in the code, so I'd have to look.
We just want to make sure that innocent people aren't being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want innocent people. And that's why I'm a big believer in due process. So you have multiple layers: law enforcement, judge, mental health expert. That's what I've tried to do with this legislation.
Marcus?
Well, there's a, she had her,
No, he had his hand
I'm
up before she
sorry.
did. Yeah, sorry.
So I'm just thinking, the bill is very complex. What can possibly go wrong?
famous last words, right?
What are they?
Famous last words, yes. I mean, even after that, when God protect us from that, the Democrats will take over one day. They will just take the law and change it to their matters by just flipping something in the bill. And so I feel like the law takes a tiny bit of my freedom away. That's how I'm just feeling about
Or
it.
you're potentially.
Give him an inch, take him out.
Set up.
Okay, yep.
What if somebody says, my neighbor has these Tea Party stickers on her car, and I see people going in and out with guns, and I'm terrified, they're making me uncomfortable, I'm afraid they're gonna shoot the neighborhood up.
That's not an imminent threat. That doesn't meet the standard.
Okay,
Maggie?
why not?
Because somebody, we're an open carry state, number one, so somebody walking out of the front door with a pistol in their head, that does not mean they are a clear and imminent threat to themselves or other. Does that make sense? So, I would argue that just because somebody has I think that doesn't meet the standard, in my opinion.
I know these mass shootings have been horrific, and that's what has politically driven us to even talk about these kinds of laws, because we think we understand what might have caused some of these people to do what they have done. But most of the, besides the suicide rate of gun use that you mentioned, the same weekend that these shootings occurred, there were many more shootings in Chicago and Baltimore and elsewhere, where more people than those mass shootings occurred. And this whole gun issue is just politically driven because of the Second Amendment. People can use any other things. They use cars, they use machetes, they use any other way, bombs. And it's not just the mentally ill, but it's the rage, the gangs, and everything else. And I feel like we're just, because of the politics around these mass shootings, we're just now, politicians are just now like, we gotta do something.
Also the media.
And maybe we shouldn't be doing something, is what I'm saying. Because we're just that's just politically driven.
I mean, you are right that Chicago has had horrific gun violence. They also have some of the strictest gun control laws in the country.
And all of those shootings did not politically drive you to come up with.
But, I mean, this is not the idea of this is not a democratic idea. I mean, President Trump came out and says, I support red flag bills if they have due process rights.
Well, he's become a politician now.
Okay, well, I'm just saying there are a lot of Republicans that have looked at this and said this is a way of protecting the rights of law-abiding citizens, but those people, like, I can't get over the fact that this kid in Parkland, 32 times the sheriff's office came to him, clearly was exhibiting violent threats.
But then maybe it's that government that should have been paying a price. Maybe we should be able to sue that police department, that city, those schools that kept that kid from paying any consequence.
Well, but Jason, and that's why I mentioned the HIPAA laws, because that kid from Parkland also was banned from going to school with any kind of a backpack or anything on because the school officials had so many problems with him. They were fearful of him coming in and doing something like that. So that was, to me, a perfect case to indicate that there's a problem here with one body not being able to speak to another body sharing the medical issues of an individual and causing,
Those governments should be held accountable.
Okay, that gentleman there, and then Nelson, and then that's the end of questions.
Just out of curiosity, if, as a citizen, if I was ever in a situation to where, a shooter situation, and I was close enough to where I could stop the threat, would I go to prison for the rest of my life for taking that guy's life? Or how does that work? Because
in Virginia, my understanding is you were allowed to use, and again, we're getting now on my law hat, and I was a prosecutor, I put a lot of bad guys in prison, but I don't really do criminal defense.
That's why I asked you.
Don't quote me, this is free legal advice and it's worth about as much as I'm giving it to you. Because my understanding of Virginia law, it's been a while since I've looked at self-defense, is you are allowed to use lethal force to protect yourself from an imminent bodily harm or danger and others. So that is my understanding. Again, I'd have to look back at some of the code, but that is my understanding.
There's a security guard in prison now for doing that on Lynn Haven Parkway, going to someone else's aid, and he was tried and convicted, and he's in prison.
Yeah.
But the guy just stopped the robbery at the 7-Eleven on the front page of the paper.
And they're still harassing you.
It would be nice if it was fair and even to everyone.
Yeah,
Who you are, you get prosecuted, you don't get prosecuted.
Yeah, they didn't prosecute the guy in the 7-Eleven who used the
He's an
firearm.
armed security guard on duty, but he set foot off his lot. And the shooter was actively shooting at people. He fired to save someone's life.
Okay.
And he's in prison now because of the Commonwealth attorney in Virginia Beach.
Nelson?
I don't know all this. Yes, sir.
Nelson, last question.
Is your bill, what does your bill have for as far as the production of the firearms and return of firearms?
It's in the custody of the individual. If the individual's of a custodian, if the individual says, I want the police to take the firearms, the police are required by law to return it to the individual. And I think I think I may have had if not, I had a conversation with somebody about some type of protection as far as liability, because some of these are some people are collectors and they're worth a lot of money.
Right, but that also brings up, let's say, we decide that I am an imminent threat. What happens to my firearms then? Does the state get to keep them and
No.
do whatever they want? I mean, I can't have them back.
It's a 14-day period, so at some point you'll be, unless you're so mentally ill you have to be committed,
I'll leave it at that.
or you commit another action where you're going to prison, I mean, then that's a totally different ball. I mean, you're not allowed to have firearms if you're a convicted felon.
What I'm saying now is you need to add something in the law so that any funds that come out of resale, whether the person is allowed to give them to somebody else or whatever you want to do. But otherwise, the state will keep those weapons because it's happening in other states. In fact, in one of the states, it's got one of these laws that, but they don't have, once they get them, they can destroy the firearms, and even if you're found innocent. I know that's not yours, but what I'm saying
I understand.
is there needs to be something in there, because if somebody's got, like, since some of that stuff is very valuable, and if for some reason they don't give it back, there's got to be some way
That's good input.
So what happens to your bill now?
Well,
Like to
we
the
go
Crime
back in
Commission?
November. The Crime Commission hasn't determined they're going to make some recommendations. Regardless, we go back in November, and listen, I'll leave some of my cards up here. I mean, any bill I can do an amendment in committee when I present the bill. That happens all the time. So I still have room to amend it. I don't claim it's perfect. There's additional protection, additional ideas. We'll accept that I have no idea. We'll come back in November and we'll see.
So all the bills submitted come back in November, or just the ones the Crime Commission says come back?
My understanding is the Crime Commission makes a recommendation, but ultimately those bills still will be heard.
All of them will
different
be heard.
committees, yeah. The different committees, whether it's militia and police or rules or wherever they go, general laws or their mental health, maybe health welfare institution.
And the Second Amendment covers what district? We asked, just in case somebody doesn't know they're in your district, you know what it.
Oh,
your
with the
district
82nd
covers?
district?
Yes.
No, it starts around 23rd Street, whatnot, at the oceanfront. A huge chunk of the oceanfront up Shore Drive to the Lesnar Bridge. And then Olive Breakneck Road kind of hugs along Laskin Road. And then Virginia Beach Boulevard hugs along Virginia Beach Boulevard as Chesapeake and Colony, and about half of Kings Green. I like to say it has the prettiest sunsets of any district.
So it's the northern part under.
Yeah, kind of the northeastern part of the city, if that makes sense.
Diane,
Okay, what?
Jason, can you supply us with those bills in anticipation? In 2 weeks, you'll be speaking to the Libertarian Party. We can send them out to everybody. They can study them, go through, red mark.
This particular
Sure, we
bill?
can. Yeah, we can get them out to you. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Okay, if I have, do you want me to send them to you or,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
or to everybody in here?
Well, we'll do a mass mailing to everybody, yeah.
Okay, so if I send it to a point person, that can be sent, okay, it'll just be a link and you can go
Well,
right
yeah.
online.
Listen, I appreciate you guys giving me the time to explain and the respectful dialogue. I like the free exchange of ideas, and like I said, I don't claim the bill's perfect. I seek your input. I'll leave some of my cards up here if you have an idea of additional language. It's an honor to serve in the capacity I serve in, but it's good to see so many friends and folks out here tonight. So.
Well, let's have a round of applause.